Yesterday was maybe, I think, one of the most important hearings, I think maybe in our lifetime. Certainly when we look at the world ahead and the one that we've been through. I'm talking, of course, about the Tony Fauci testimony in front of Rand Paul and the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. We covered it live here on the HighWire. I gave a preamble and closed out the show with some commentary from Siri. For those of you that missed it, I highly recommend. It's going to be on our website forever. You should check it out. But for those of you that missed it and haven't had the opportunity, just here's a little bit of the, I guess we were planning on fireworks. I don't know if you can call them fireworks. Maybe it's more like a flood or a mud wrestling match, not sure, but you decide.
1 million Americans died from COVID-19. Some estimate as many as 15 million people died worldwide. Anthony Fauci promoted the theory that the virus arose naturally, while privately, he was well aware of a mountain of evidence suggesting the virus originated in the lab. Dangerous research was funded by NIAID in a totalitarian country in a lab that lacked acceptable safety standards. The COVID lockdown could never have been inflicted without you aiding and abetting the crime. I hope today Dr. Fauci will come clean.
This hearing appears to be a culmination of months of biased and selected efforts by the majority under the guise of a committee investigation to basically legitimize a predetermined conclusion that was reached years ago. One-sided investigations designed to validate predetermined conclusions do not serve the American people.
Given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Therefore, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions.
The Trump administration has launched a baseless set of smears against vaccines that help pull us out of that public health crisis. And it has used a politicized Department of Justice to target the researchers who helped us track and understand the novel virus. Today's hearing is another page in that playbook, sadly, tragically.
These attacks upon Dr. Fauci, it's not just about him. It's sending signals to others who are thinking about serving our country, our scientists, our doctors, our healthcare professionals, our researchers. Trying to show to them that if you don't get in line with the politics, that you will also potentially be subject to attacks.
I certainly understand why you needed a pardon. I certainly understand why, on the advice of counsel, you're not answering any questions, because I think it'd be almost impossible for you to answer the questions truthfully without really demonstrating what you did.
The haphazard information you released and pushed on the American people with little research is appalling, and why there's so much distrust in our institutions today. That trust is crucial to public health, and you, more than any person or event in my lifetime, have destroyed that trust for millions of Americans.
Clearly, what you think today is that somehow you're above reproach. You may have had a 50-plus year legacy of public service, but it ends in total and complete disgrace.
This is the pardon you have heard so much about. This pardon goes back to, and if you'll see, January the 1st of 2014. Did you talk to President Biden and ask for this pardon?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did you specifically ask that it be dated back to the beginning of 2014?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I'm just very interested why it was this date. Did it have anything to do with the fact that 2014 was also the year that the NIAID or NIH began funding EcoHealth Alliance's Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence Grant?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Somewhere along the line, it became all about you. You became a narcissist and a megalomaniac and a liar. And you've lied to the American people, and you've lied to this body. And you've disgraced your profession by doing it. You called yourself the most famous scientist in the world. You've done more to harm science than anybody in my lifetime. And I hope you'll go home and write that in your diary.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Well, nothing says honesty like taking the Fifth, huh, Doc?
Well, it was really quite an amazing thing to watch one of the biggest mouthpieces in the world with virtually nothing to say except pleading the Fifth. The official count, I believe, is 111 times throughout the hearing. He had to, and by the way, after 111 times, this man we have trusted with our lives still could not, I guess, memorize that sentence, but had to pick it up. I don't know if it was just to hold himself back from screaming, "You can't handle the truth." But something made him look down every single time and read every single word of the Fifth Amendment in order to escape, I guess, prosecution. But really, let's say it, here's the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or in naval forces, or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. But as I was going to say, really it wasn't prosecution that he was protecting himself from, it was persecution. He had blanket immunity handed to him by Joe Biden through this pardon. There was nothing that he had done, nothing that he could have said previously. All of his errors were exonerated. The only thing that could get him in trouble would be for him to lie on the stand on this day. That's it. Everything else, he was completely protected. And so what was he protecting himself? No. I spoke with Siri after this incredible display and asked him some of the understanding of the pardon and how that went along with it, and if we're going to see a contempt of court case. Here's what Aaron had to say.
The pardon that he got was for what he did in a certain period of time. The pardon wouldn't apply to crimes committed after the period, after the date of the pardon. You can't pardon somebody for future events. That would be pretty incredible. Could you imagine? Hey, you're pardoned for any crimes you commit tomorrow. Well, you know, some people might go commit a lot of crimes the next day. So if he lied to Congress today, then he could be held in contempt and he could potentially be prosecuted for that. That pardon wouldn't have extended to anything that he lied about today. But if he didn't lie today, even if he admitted to a crime from the past that was covered by the pardon, he couldn't be prosecuted. And that's why, you heard Senator Paul say to him, hey, I asked you, for example, about destroying emails. Even if you admitted that you destroyed those emails, if that pardon applies, nobody could prosecute you. You wouldn't be under jeopardy per the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, just answer honestly, right? Now, here's the thing. I actually think that Fauci's lawyers made a big mistake in the following way. in that opening monologue that Fauci gave, okay, I've taken depositions where the litigant pleads the fifth to every question, right? But you heard at the end that they talk about, well, you can't come and give a statement and then plead the fifth, and that's exactly right.
Right.
You can't say I didn't commit the crime, and then when they ask you a follow up, you plead the fifth. No, once you've opened the door, so to speak, to a topic, pleading the fifth no longer becomes appropriate. You can't use it as a sword and a shield, right? So you either don't use it, or once you've used it. So, for example, in his opening statement, he said that Rand Paul slandered him. Well, I would ask follow-up questions about that. I'd say, well, how did I slander you, sir? How did I slander you? He opened the door. He said that Rand Paul slandered him. Well, what were the slanderous statements? He said, for example, I've had a decade-long cooperation with Congress. Okay, great. With regards to what? What did you cooperate? He basically in that one statement to me said, I testified 200 times. And in all that testimony, I was cooperative to me, which means I was honest, I was forthright. Great. He just opened the door, in my view, to everything with that one statement. And they could have driven a truck through that.
Well, I mean, that is going to be the conversation going into next week now. Our understanding is there is going to be hearings about contempt of court. Is Fauci in contempt of court for multiple reasons? Number one, he had a pardon. Some would say just having a pardon takes away any implication that you could, injure yourself or indict yourself upon your own words. He's already protected. So it really takes away the entire purpose of the Fifth Amendment. That's one argument being made. But Aaron and other senators actually made the point that because he made an opening statement, he's only allowed to come out of the gate and just say, plead the fifth. I'm not going to say anything today. As soon as you say something or try to make a point or defend yourself, now you have a real issue. So you should have, you didn't use your Fifth Amendment right. You're not allowed to make that statement. So I think all of this is going to be on display next week. And of course, there was the moment where his own attorney was dragged out. I couldn't hear the words, but are we to understand that the client, Fauci, is pleading the fifth, but the lawyer was going to still try to make arguments for him and on his behalf? Not allowed to do that either. So there's going to be a lot to look at legally on what really happened there. But I want to take it away from Fauci, really, because I don't really think that is what this hearing ended up being about yesterday. In fact, I was finding myself very confused and frustrated, and I couldn't put words to exactly what is it I'm feeling and experiencing here until Senator Moreno had this to say. Take a listen to this.
Those policies were put in place because you had moronic politicians that listened to the words of a megalomaniac who was more interested in having met a Kardashian than the suffering of the American people, and that is you. Your advice to communities like that, to idiotic politicians who enforce those rules, arrested that mom for watching a football game with her own family outside. When that story broke, I said to myself, I cannot stand idly on the side and watch this happen. It was about 6 years ago today that I decided I'm going to give up my businesses, sell them all, run for office, run for the United States Senate. Here I am sitting in front of you 6 years later saying, who the fuck do you think you were for doing that? It is a total disgrace what you did to this country. And if my Democrat colleagues are standing there defending you, I hope the voters of the United States of America watch the clips of every one of you doting on a guy who was more interested in being a celebrity than saving American people.
It really, what he pointed out there was what I found very disturbing. Okay, Tony Fauci is here pleading the fifth. He doesn't want to speak, but it was the Democrats there and their response to this entire thing that I found absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, mind-blowing. I don't know whether today I should be addressing this with rage or complete sadness. I think what I have is utter terror for the future of this nation if half of our governing body thinks this is what yesterday was about.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci, for coming on out in front of this committee. I know it's not what you would want. It's not what you deserve.
It is unfortunate that you have been put in the position that you are in today. And it must be enormously frustrating to know that this hearing is designed to entrap you.
Instead of focusing on the national security challenges that we are facing in our country right now, today's hearing looks backwards, revisiting questions this committee has already examined, rather than building on that work to strengthen our preparedness against future disasters. We are instead relitigating the past.
This attempt to rebrand one of the most challenging times in our nation's history is a short-sighted act of desperation that will leave us less prepared for the next pandemic.
Since President Trump took office in 2025, more than 4,500 cases of measles have been reported. Children are dying because there has been increased vaccine hesitancy, fueled by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and frankly, his entire administration.
Republicans are eager to rebrand you as a villain in order to distract from their own failure to protect Americans.
That's what I wish we were having hearings about in this committee and in the Health Committee.
Essentially, every Democrat stated in one way or another, there's no purpose for this hearing. We need to focus on future pandemics and being prepared for them. Why are we looking in the past? I don't know. Maybe because, like, one of the most famous lines in history is, if we do not learn from our past or learn from our history, we are doomed to repeat it. Let's start there. But the fact that an entire party, sans, one politician from Pennsylvania who actually said, I don't know why we can't take new questions despite where they're coming from. Of course, I'm talking about John Fetterman, the only man that said, look, I think there's some questions that have to be answered here. You think? You think there's just a couple questions that need to be answered? And instead they said this is grandstanding. First of all, I want to point a couple of things out. Can we all just be honest here for a second? This is not a political show. I'm not getting political. I'm an observer now of the United States of America that is sitting in a critical moment, having just gone through the greatest destruction of our civil rights we have ever experienced, brought on to us by our government, led by a health department, spoken about by one of the biggest mouthpieces, Tony Fauci, that's now sitting on the stand. But he didn't work for the Democratic Party. He is not, as far as I know, has never run in the Democratic Party. He was never elected. In fact, he was elected by a Republican, Ronald Reagan, and did most of the damage that this hearing is discussing under President Trump. I could understand, I guess, if someone wanted to shut this down, it certainly should have been President Trump. He should have been calling Rand Paul, shut this thing down. This makes me look bad. I should never have hired this idiot. I should have fired him once he was going against me and, committing what I believe to be treason. Trump didn't do that. Trump's not shutting this down. Not that, nobody should be. Why is anyone believing we should not be having this conversation? How can anybody with blood moving through their veins, especially, and when did this issue become partisan? Republicans and Democrats all lost jobs during these lockdowns. Republicans and Democrats all had loved ones die inside of hospitals, and we couldn't stand with them because of Tony Fauci. Republicans and Democrats all have children that are having speech delays because they couldn't see lips when they were in formative years. Republicans and Democrats all had students that were on the verge of scholarships to go to college that couldn't play sports, that lives were forever altered. And now today we actually have new information. We have a document dump including a diary by Tony Fauci. He says, oh my God, you're revealing my diary, as though we broke into his house and stole it off of a shelf or from under his bed. He put that diary on a server on a government website that we, the citizens of the United States of America, own. A man who has forgotten you worked for us, used my computer system, my email system to write your diary. That is your problem, not ours, and thank God you did it. Because now we know you lied to the entire public. Now you know, even after saying in front of Congress you admitted social distancing just sort of appeared. Is there not a hearing worthy of just that? Because all of the things I just stated, not being with loved ones, not being able to do sports, people being dragged out of football stadiums in the fresh, clean air, were because you told us the science was distancing. I think one of the best presentations was by Republican James Lankford. He made such clear, concise points, and I think he knew this was going to be the argument. And I think what he's saying is, really, if we could come up with one question that all of us should want an answer to, would that not make this hearing worthwhile? Here's the question he had, and by the way, it wasn't his question. It was a question written in Fauci's own diary. Watch this.
February the 1st, same year, 2020. This is, again, still before our first death. There was not total agreement about the likelihood of deliberate insertion. Ron said he was sure that this could occur naturally, and we should not waste our time and divert our effort to pursue this. This is expected of him since he was the original gain-of-function person with Yoshi. Also, Christian was with Ron. The rest felt deliberate insertion was possible, and given the fact that Dr. Jingling Shi at the University of Wuhan has been working for years in gain-of-function in coronaviruses to allow adaptation of the spike protein to bind to the human ACE2 receptor, we could not let this go. That's a remarkable statement for February the 1st of 2020, when there hadn't even been the first death here, but we knew something was moving. You knew well that something was moving. You identified February the 1st before any of us had ever heard of the Wuhan lab, not only the Wuhan lab in the conversation, but literally the scientist that you named in your own notes, the lead scientist that was there. It's interesting to me on that. And the questions I was going to ask you was just your background and knowledge about the Wuhan lab and Dr. Shi and all the details.
In fact, Lankford goes on in that statement to say that you, even in your diary, question the WHO, saying that China has so much power over it, we should question, should we be interacting with China? Should we be doing science with China? All really, really important questions. And to find out that Tony Fauci himself knew that the scientists around him believed this was of potential lab origin, did question, should we be working with China? If there's one question we should all have is, and don't we, if we're going to protect from future pandemics, shouldn't we be asking this question? Is it a good idea to be developing viruses and giving them attributes of gain of function, of an ability to affect human beings with nations that could potentially be seen as our enemy, like China? Why not just get together with Putin too? Why don't we just throw some scientists in Russia and have Russia and America work on some deadly viruses and make sure they can infect human beings? Is this not a question we're all supposed to debate? Because this hearing is about gain of function. It's about, is this a good idea? Did we fund it? Not just Fauci. Did we, America, fund this? Did we create this pandemic that killed millions, mostly, I would say, from the vaccine itself, which was the best delivery system for this horrific disease? But Democrats all sit there and say, no, there is no question to be had here today. How are we going to protect the future if we are not asking these questions? Rand Paul makes this point very clear. This is what he did.
For years, Anthony Fauci has been the public face of saying this in all likelihood came from nature. He kept saying, it's the marketplace, it's the marketplace, it's the marketplace. He's been saying that on television up until recently. But what we find is that what he was saying in public is different than what he was saying in private. In January, in private, he wrote that looks like the wet market was a super spreader event. It didn't originate there. We know that some of the earliest deaths and sickness came from somewhere else. But then for years and years, we got dishonesty. So let's play the video so we can see a little juxtaposition of the problem we're dealing with.
Fauci's journal entries contradict what he said publicly about the origins of COVID-19. Fauci admitted in January 2020 that the initial outbreak of COVID did not occur at a wet market.
Take a really good look at the animal-human interface and the fact that animals from the wild are being brought into wet markets. You have animals that come out of the wild that are sold at these open, what they call them, wet markets. Wet markets, where you bring animals in from the wild who have these viruses. The wet markets in Asia, where people bring animals from the forest into market. There are wet markets in Wuhan that are ample opportunity for a virus to jump from an animal. The origin was from a bat to an intermediate host to a human, very likely in a wet market. And those animals should not have been in the Wuhan market. They knew that those animals should not have been in the market, and they immediately cleaned out the market, put restrictions on the kinds of animals that come into these wet markets. I think they should shut down those things right away. I mean, it boggles my mind.
What boggles the mind is that we know none of that was true. Now, even if you believed he just didn't know and really believed it was natural origin, then still we made a mistake in America, because let's be clear, here is the now positioned theory on the pinnacle of all of the world. House panel concludes that COVID-19 pandemic came from a lab leak. We also know CIA shifts assessment on COVID origins, saying lab leak likely caused the outbreak. That is our result, and the headlines go all around the world. Every investigation, nobody now stands in this was of natural origin. And so as we sit in this hearing, I have to ask every Democrat, and I know there's Democrats that watch the show. By the way, let me remind you, I was director of communications for a Democrat in the Democratic Party in the very last election. Okay, so I'm not that far away from it. Maybe it's why I'm so frustrated. But are we saying that no Democrat has a problem with the fact that we got that exactly wrong? And now we have an internal diary. We don't have to trick him into perjuring himself. His own internal diary tells us what we all already assumed, which he knew. This did not come from nature. It came from a lab. And so as I sit here and think, how are none of these things? These don't matter. To the Democratic Party, this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When you think we can prepare for the next pandemic, when we look at this one and we got everything exactly wrong. We got the origin of this virus completely wrong. And now the world knows everything said on the news was wrong. We got the social distancing wrong because Tony Fauci's admitted in front of the Congress that just kind of appeared and had no basis in science. We got that wrong. We got the fact that this vaccine would stop transmission completely wrong. Everybody caught it. Everyone had to change their tune on the news. And how did that happen? We're not allowed to have a hearing to ask what went wrong there? I was really shocked until I found, did you know that yesterday, right after this hearing, the Democratic Party just changed its official symbol? This blew my mind. This is what I grew up with when I was a Democrat, and now as of yesterday, this is the new symbol for the Democratic Party. Astounding. So as I think about what happened yesterday, and I've tried to understand. So many of us thought, when did the Democrats walk away from natural health? My body, my choice. Protecting the environment, protecting my water, protecting my air, protecting my food supply, protecting the products that are being injected inside of me. Where did that all happen? So many of us, I've been honest on the show, I'm politically marooned because I grew up a Democrat. But I've watched over these last several years as the Democrats say, we are the party of science. And they are the party of crazy zealot religions. I guess that is this divide, because we are clearly now. What is so terrifyingly scary and sad now about America is this canyon now between our experience of the greatest attack on our civil liberties that's ever been is so incredibly different. This is a Grand Canyon, a mile across and a mile deep. I don't know if I know how to build this bridge anymore. How is it we are this far apart? Because if you're the party of science, can we remember the scientific method? The scientific method was supposed to be departure from faith-based religion. The scientific method is supposed to say, ask us any question, challenge our theories, challenge our products, and may the best man win. We love the opportunity to defend the science, to, in a public forum, show you why we're right. We don't have to demand your faith. We don't have to call you a heretic. We don't have to see if you float or sink or if you're a witch or not. Those are the bygone days. We're in science now. We're the party of science. And then you look at Fauci, just like he's a vaccine, has been given complete liability protection. Why? If he's so pure, why does he need liability protection? But he has it. Complete liability protection. Nothing can touch him as long as he just tells us the truth. Isn't that what science is supposed to do? It's supposed to stand in the provable truth. And the party of science stood there and watched as the man with liability protection, who he himself said, if you question me, you are questioning the science. Well, we watched the science take the stand. And in front of the whole world, the science just pleaded the fifth. Let that sink in for a moment. And ask yourself, where are we at today?